Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1052 just came out, and with this chapter, the dream is dead, the raid succeeded, and I was completely wrong. With that being said, we can still evaluate this chapter for what it was. Probably not fully fairly evaluate it, because I'm still reeling from the surprise that that was just the climax and that the arc is just over. It felt a little sudden to me, but obviously it's going to feel a little sudden to me. So, with that being said, let's talk about the chapter a little bit. It had a good mix of, comedy stuff, characters who haven't talked to each other in a while, basically getting to have their first interactions in some time, and some hype and build up for the next chapter, which might be, I'm still a little uncertain about this, but I guess the next chapter is the end of WANO. It's kind of hard to decipher. I'm seeing different translations or whatever, but as we all know, Oda is going to go on a 1-month break after next chapter. So it seems like 1053 is going to be the end of WANO, or at least some big finishing point for the WANO arc before we move into the final saga. So next chapter, obviously Oda building some hype excitement towards that with the bounties and emperors and obviously Admiral Rikogyu. But we'll get to that in a second. So first of all, with this chapter, what I liked was definitely the comedy. Particularly, I'd say the standout moment by far, this moment made me actually laugh out loud. Not in it made me smile kind of way. Like, I actually laughed out loud reading this line, which was Zoro waking up and saying, "That's right, I came back from hell so that I could kill you," and then just going at it with Sanji, because I think that's one of my favorite, probably my favorite Zoro-Sanji comedy moment in a long time, because after that, very genuine moment that they had during the King and Queen fight with Sanji trusting Zoro to basically put him down if it were to come to that, and Zoro obviously taking that responsibility, but obviously internally not wanting that to ever happen. And then after everything Zoro goes through, basically going to death's door, you could say, his first response to Sanji upon coming back is like basically shoving all of that sentimentality and everything out the window, just being like, "Oh yeah, I came back from hell so I could fulfill this last task you left me with." I just thought it was a great way to wrap up that last interaction that they had. So that's actually probably going to go down as one of my favorite Zoro-Sanji moments in the entire series. I just thought it was really funny. So beyond that, we had some gag moments that, I can appreciate it for the tone, but it's also kind of like the typical One Piece type guy. So like Momonosuke and Nami, who had that on their bingo card. I think we all knew that sort of weird scene was going to happen at some point, so we got that crossed off, basically got that out of the way. Wonder if that's going to keep coming up. Sanji's reactions to Yamato and everything in the bath, that's the One Piece we know. So I like the overall tone set from the comedy, but I think the bit that really stood out that actually made me laugh was the Zoro-Sanji interaction, so I enjoyed that. Flip side, the weird stuff to me, I know people are happy that some characters died. I know we all wanted some characters to potentially, in a big war and everything like that, maybe some characters dying would be good. But I'm just confused by the manner in which it happened, because the characters that died were the characters that I don't think anybody thought were dead. So it's kind of like in One Piece, we're just so used to everyone kind of just surviving everything, right? You can Pell survived that bomb, that gigantic bomb that would have destroyed probably most of Alubarna. And Ashura Doji apparently just died off of some TNT, Dynamite. And Izzo just died from some standard, I guess, Shigan type stuff, finger pistol type stuff, which, I don't know, we didn't see the full extent of the fight, but to me, I think it's more so, it's not just what they died from, but rather how Oda did it, which is that Oda wrote in some characters that seemed like they could have had some pretty major death scenes, right? So Kinemon, Kiku, and those were framed as death scenes when we got them initially, right? Versus Ashura Doji and Izzo, where it was clear like their fates were more ambiguous. It was kind of like a very quick thing that sort of happened for both of them. Brief panels, especially for Izzo, it just seemed like Izzo ran into CP0 and basically stalled them for a moment, but went down after that. But I don't think anybody at that time was thinking Izzo died and that was written as a death scene, or Ashura Doji died and that was written as a death scene. It's just later on, I guess, we found out that, okay, so the characters that got full death scenes and dramatic send-offs like Kinemon and Kiku, for some reason those characters survived, but then kind of penciling in basically characters that we didn't expect anything, permanent had happened to, such as Ashura and Izzo. Turns out that they actually just didn't survive. It's just surprising to me because in that case, the drama that we could have gotten out of like a proper death send-off for an Izzo or for an Ashura Doji for their final scenes, I think that like those instead went to other characters, but then those characters didn't die. You guys get what I'm saying? And that like the actual drama of the deaths, I feel like we were a little bit robbed of that in my opinion, and that we kind of had to have some deaths at the end of it, so therefore Oda chose those two characters to basically be dead at the end of it. I don't know. That's just my feeling at the moment. I'm still personally confused by the way that the deaths were chosen. So, I don't know. Just one thought on it. However, in terms of the bounties and the feast, I think we do have something really big to look forward to next chapter because I went back and looked at previous chapters where we've gotten, the bounties, where we've gotten the feast and everything like that. And what's interesting is that this is the first chapter where the first time that Oda has had a build-up chapter to those moments. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is basically, normally when we get the bounties, it's kind of like we just get them. So we're reading the chapter and suddenly we find out, hey, we're getting new bounty this chapter, and then by the end of the chapter, it's revealed, here's your new number, bam, and it's like a really big number or whatever, right? Same with the feast, things are kind of just going or whatever, and then over the course of the chapter, we find out, hey, we're getting a feast, be it Alabasta, be it Enies Lobby or whatever. The feast kind of just develops over the course of the chapter, basically, and you kind of check that scene off and move on. This is the first time that we're kind of getting hype and build up towards it. So it's like a prelude chapter with basically Momonosuke coming in and saying, hey, I've got a huge feast planned. We've got Apu coming back. Apu's storyline, I don't know. I'm not even going to say anything about that. But we've got Apu coming back basically and being like, hey, here's the bounties. You guys want to see them? There's new emperors and everything like that. And we're not going to get to next chapter to see them. Right? So to me, that gives me the sense that next chapter probably going to have a full, a full few pages or so basically dedicated to like really emphasizing like, here are the big bounties. Here's what the Yonko crew bounties now look like. Or we don't even know they're going to be Yonko at this point. We might have 5 emperors because Oda's been playing up Law and Kid as basically equals. So I don't know. But yeah, revealing who the new emperors are, revealing the full crew bounties and everything like that, I think that Oda's going to devote a little bit of time to that. I'm interested to see if Kid and Law's crew get bounties at all, because it'll be kind of bizarre to me if, Kid has a bounty, Killer has a bounty, but then we're finding out that like Heat and Wire got bounties from doing nothing basically. If Beppo's got like a 400 million bounty or something like that, Jean Bart, stuff like that. So we'll see. It's going to be a hard sell on the idea that these two have just become emperors, or even that one of them has become an emperor with what we saw over the course of the war. I think that Kid, you could maybe sell that with just the fact that he's got Killer underneath him, and Killer is clearly pretty strong. Killer apparently killed Hawkins. That's another weird aspect to me of the whole death scenario, which is that Hawkins he's talking about himself as the 1% man this whole time. And he still, like, his dialogue and everything over the course of the arc, it doesn't make as much sense with that context, at least to me, particularly his interactions with Killer, but maybe reading in the flow of the whole reread or something like that, it'll make more sense. But is Hawkins dead? Because I can't 100% tell. I guess Hawkins is dead. It just seemed like he died, but I couldn't 100% tell. And we know sometimes ambiguous deaths, at least in the past, have meant that they're not actually dead. Obviously with Ashura and Izzo, they unfortunately happen to be the strangest exceptions over the course of the entire series. But regardless, big bounties probably coming. I said in the past that I personally think that Luffy's will be 5 billion. I think a lot of people still believe that that's shooting too high. The reason I still say it's going to be probably 5 billion is because just in the whole case that I made in my initial argument for Luffy having 5 billion is simply that the purpose of the bounties is usually just an exciting moment to wow the reader, right? So the goal is usually to make it higher than the reader expects. So if you remember Luffy's last bounty, 1.5 billion, I don't know if you guys remember, but nobody was expecting 1.5 billion at that time. Pretty much everybody had it like maybe a little bit above Katakuri's or something like that, maybe just about hitting the billion mark, but nobody had 1.5 billion. But again, the excitement of the bounty reveal is that it's something to wow the reader, get the reader hyped, get the reader pumped, which is why Oda has basically consistently throughout the series always made Luffy's bounty at the end of the day higher than whoever he just beat, right? So East Blue, you know, he just beat Arlong, right? Along with some other lower level pirates, right? So he just beat Arlong. But with the culmination of everything that Luffy did over East Blue, it's not like, you know, the rational guess might be like, okay, you beat 17 million, 18 million, or 15 million, 17 million, 20 million. Okay, maybe you get 25 million, but it's to wow the reader, right? So that goes to 30 million, like all the way like a full 50% higher than Arlong's, which is pretty crazy. Crocodile, right? Crocodile at 81 million, but Luffy goes all the way to 100 million. Doflamingo, 340 million, but Luffy goes all the way to 500 million. Katakuri, again, that was the biggest surprise in recent memory. Katakuri's was 1 billion, but Oda took Luffy's all the way to 1.5 billion. Again, a full 50% higher than Katakuri's, which is pretty crazy to think about at that time. So I do think that with what just happened with Kaido, right, Luffy did pretty much beat him just straight up. At the end of the day, it was a 1v1. He beat him straight up. And on top of that, the fact that Luffy now has, you know, more nations probably allied to him, more significant nations allied to him than a Kaido or anything like that. Like, he's got Wano, but he's also got Zou. He's also got Fishman Island. On top of that, the huge Grand Fleet that have been making waves throughout the New World. And on top of that, the biggest piece is that the world government is freaking out about him for reasons bigger than him just being a pirate. They're freaking out about the fact that Nika has returned. Luffy has awakened this legendary fruit that the world government seems to fear to, you know, to the highest degree. So I think that all of these factors combine suggest that Luffy's not just going to top Kaido's bounty, but top it by at least a decent margin. So I think 5 billion is very reasonable in that sense. So I'm looking forward to the bounties. Might be totally wrong on that, but I do think that that's the range that we're headed towards for Luffy. And then finally, we've got Admiral Ryukogyu coming up. I think that I'm not going to say anything about, you know, thoughts about Ryukogyu's identity or anything like that. There's previous videos for that. But I think that it's interesting that it is revealed at the end of the day that he does have plant-based powers and probably a plant Logia. I say that's interesting because plants, to me, as a Logia ability, have always seemed as probably... I think we knew that we would get a plant Logia at some point, and when Ryukogyu was first introduced, based on his dialogue and the color, green, most people speculated that, look, he's probably got a plant Logia, that's the safest bet. I had always internally hoped that it wouldn't turn out to be a plant Logia, just because, to me, plants are not a very powerful, intimidating, interesting ability, right? I mean, who's the other plant user that we know in the series so far? It's Usopp. And no one's scared of pop greens. Like, come on now. Like, you look over to your right and you got Nami wielding Zeus, the power of thunder and lightning itself. And then you look to the left and you got Usopp. He's wielding some pop greens. I don't know. Plants have just never seemed like that powerful of an ability to me. As particularly for an admiral. Obviously, we know it's an admiral, so that's going to make it a very powerful ability in that context. But to me, it's just plants have always just seemed a little underwhelming to me personally, right? I will say that the one exception I can think of is the first Hokage, Hashirama from Naruto. He found a way to make wood seem broken in that context, but in general, trees, flowers, etc., not the most broken power in the world, right? I will say that depending on the scale of what we see of what Ryukogyu can do, so this is something that somebody mentioned that I thought was pretty interesting on my last stream, which is that if Ryukogyu is coming to Wano and he has plant-based abilities, well, he could potentially do something crazy like restore vegetation across all of Wano country, because that is one of the big things that's been discussed and called out about Wano. You know, one of the deeper rooted problems that have developed over the last 20 years, which is that Orochi and Kaido basically destroyed all vegetation in the land, right? Outside of the flower capital, most of the land's vegetation and greenery and everything like that has been laid to waste. Obviously, you have little pockets here in Kuri and Hakumai and things like that. But for the most part, Wano looks more like a barren wasteland across the board. So the final piece to kind of maybe visually restore Wano to its former glory would be maybe Ryukogyu doing a gigantic feat, such as bringing back plant life across the entire nation. So this huge, basically conglomerate of islands, basically just bringing plant life across the board back there. I think that that would be a really impressive feat to start off with, because in general, when Oda introduces these admirals, he has them flex their ability in some huge way, right? Fujitora bringing down a meteor, Aokiji freezing the entire sea for like, I guess like several days walk or something like that as far as the eye can see. Kainu destroying this gigantic iceberg, Kizaru destroying one of the Subodi Archipelago gigantic trees. So he always has the admirals do some sort of major flex with their Devil Fruit abilities to kind of show off a teaser of what they can do. I think that that would be one of the, probably the most impressive thing that I can think of that a plant user could be shown doing. So definitely looking forward to next chapter, especially considering that we're probably about to get a huge break after. We are going to get a huge break after that chapter, so whatever Oda concludes that chapter with is probably going to be a huge cliffhanger. And beyond that, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and you can like and subscribe, and you can support me on Patreon to get my extended thoughts on this and all future topics. Link in the description below.